Hello again. Different platform this time. We are actually using Riverside.fm, which is an awesome. They're not sponsoring this, but just I've been using it for a few things, and it's a lot of fun. So we're trying it here with Evan today, but we are on episode 7, and we're going to talk about editing today. Um, Evan has done a ton of editing, lots of documentary style stuff, uh, as far as lots of commercial stuff. My cat's running around the house, but anyways, moving on. Evan, why don't you give us a quick introduction of who you
Yeah,
are?
sure. What's up, guys? I'm Evan. I'm a filmmaker and entrepreneur out here in Greenville, South Carolina, originally from LA. And I had started out as an editor working for some broadcast TV stuff growing up, kind of around high school, late high school into college. I stayed local for school. So I got to work all the way through. I worked for 5 years as an assistant and then eventually took over doing like a little 30-minute broadcast show, and then I went to the coast right after that. I got loosely recruited to go work at this e-learning startup called Madecraft that was partnered with LinkedIn Learning. It was a sister company, so we were doing courses that were tailored toward a market that LinkedIn was kind of R&Ding. They were kind of exploring a little bit, and that really, I think more than anything that really grew my chops because I understood startup lifestyle. Finally, I didn't understand what this whole big old corporate thing of startup life was. I just knew what my art background was, and I kept wanting to do that. But then getting into this was like, okay, so there's a whole business to film that I didn't know about before. And they weren't necessarily a film company, obviously more, I would say more online platform e-learning based, but they definitely understood the power of using what we do every day. And I started to find out what my value was because prior to that, I just loved what I was doing and it was making some money. And then I started realizing how much value I was providing them and how they were able to build a team, with my contributions. And by the time I left, it was a year and a half later, and I had done managed and edited 115 hour length courses or something with full graphics treatment and all that stuff and burned myself out to a degree that I
Oh
was
man,
not proud of how burned out I was. And it put me mentally in a really not great spot. And so Greenville kind of was this like castle on the hill type thing for me almost, where we came out and visited my friend Nick Worrell, who's out here in the Greenville area. He like kind of grabbed me and was like, you should pay attention to this because this is really, really important. As another LA kid to an LA kid in his early 20s, you need to hear like how different my life is now that I moved somewhere where I can process my day to day. And then he started showing me as an editor, he does everything, but as an editor, what he was making out here just remotely, and nobody cared where he was. And I was like, wow, okay, so this is the world we live in now. And I had applied for a bunch of jobs during that time after the startup. Probably applied to like 40 different jobs and only got interviewed at one over the span of 2 months. And I definitely
damn.
had good resume to show. Yeah, I had good resume to show, but I just was like, I can't do this chase. And I have a network that's ready to take me freelancing a little bit, even if it's only little $200 little, edits every
Yep.
once in a while or a little color thing every once in a while. Like I wasn't making anything at that point, but I saw that if I did that and I built relationships, which is part of my story too, that it would grow. Me and my buddy Max, this is how you and I met, Rhodes. Me and my buddy Max started a meetup called Greenville Film Society in 2021, right around then. I think it was right around June or so. And you came out probably right around then.
Yep.
And there was just so much excitement. I remember when we first talked, there was just so much excitement around growth and markets that I didn't really even know about that you were familiar with Spartanburg and Anderson and all this stuff and all these other people that I had no idea about. And just saw this flourishing here of people that were just ready to do something. Like everybody here is just ready to take steps toward growth in film and even just make their own projects or whatever it is. And I love that this community just goes and makes it and doesn't wait for permission to do that. So that's been just how the last 3 years have been, and it's been such a lovely time. Honestly, it's been amazing. So
Yeah, there's been a ton of growth up here lately, and yeah, Greenfield Film Society again. I don't know if you've listened to other podcasts, but just always touching on building community, building connections, all those things,
yeah,
and it's just so essential. And like you brought out here because of community, because of
a lack
Nick,
of
Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
So, but that's cool. Yeah. So with editing, getting into it, there are lots of different styles. Your main style is documentary, right?
That's right. Yep.
But you've done lots of different little projects all
Hmm.
around different
Hmm.
platforms. Um, what kind of leads you into more documentary style editing?
Um, I think it's funny because I think it's a piece of what we just talked about. I've always had an interest in knowing more about people, and in the edit, I can control that so much more effectively. I also produce and direct and stuff, but when I'm in the edit, or even if I am producing and directing, I end up being the guy in the chair every time. And I ask myself, how did I get so fortunate to do this again? I'm always like bored, like always on the edge of like wanting to not do it again. But then once you get going into an edit and you start diving into the story of these people, which is so much of what docs are about, or history or whatever it is, you start to understand so much more about who you are through these people, because you see what pulls them, what drives them, and you see what you relate to or what you don't relate to. And I think that's what really drew me toward docs, is it's real life, and editing them is very challenging and it takes so much time, but it's really worth that investment, because you learn about yourself and you learn about other people and you learn about the world very quickly. I've noticed, because you get so many different worldviews of different people all at one time. Any documentary you watch will have it, whether or not they're a criminal or an upstanding citizen, or it's just, you get this whole kind of different side of filmmaking. And a lot of the work that I've done is in kind of awareness advocacy filmmaking. I've done a lot in the autism space, and that really changed my perspective on like, oh, this is like a product, this is like a tool that we can use. And it all starts in the edit. No matter what's been shot, it all starts in the edit, trying to determine, okay, we got all this news gathering, right? It's like news gathering or journalism. You're like getting all this stuff that you have over a couple shoot days, and you'll have questions and they'll take them a different way, so you have no idea if you're actually getting the substance you want. So then you got to reconvene in the edit, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and you got to go shoot more, or you plot the course forward and make it happen. So I think a lot of my technique and stuff with editing came from commercial and came from other routes, like even just some music video stuff and all that before. But then bringing that and applying that into learning really what story structure is, because it really is just like a narrative when you're doing docs. You really have to build it out. Like, that never occurred to me at the beginning, probably why it was so hard to do it at first. But you're really trying to get them through a 3-act structure and explain what the conflict is and
Yep.
explain their hurdles. It's hero's journey every time, pretty much. So I don't know. That's like why it's lit my fire.
So there's like different styles of documentary, docu story where you can kind of do some pre-production and plan out kind of where you want to go. Like nature shows and stuff, you kind of know the story you're trying to tell, but you don't know when something's going to happen, so you just have to run out.
Yeah.
Or there's
Yep.
true, just following along, seeing what happens. But I think having done it, more and more, you kind of know, you pick up on those beats and like, okay, we need to follow up with this, or we need to um, make sure that we have some kind of close, some kind of really big finish. So a lot of, you can use that even in interviews too, just people rambling and talking. Um, so having edited documentaries makes you better on the pre-production and on the production side, I
Absolutely.
think.
I
And
think it
that,
makes you crave that, right?
yeah, and that can go for any kind of style shooting. But so like, how has that affected your pre-production and your production?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good bridge, because a lot of the work that I've done in that space has helped reestablish what my voice is as a filmmaker. I think I've
Hmm.
always tried to be intention and I said it earlier, but an advocate for other people. That's like a big part of, I think, what my personality has become, which is more focused on others than myself. I try to be the best I can. We're all working on that, not being so self-focused on everything nowadays. But I think it seeing the errors and things that I probably could have fixed. A lot of editors will say that in the edit. I could see, oh, okay, if we had planned this better, I would have been able to just this would have gone, if you think of efficiency, 25% faster or 30% faster or easier or whatever it is, right? And so I think with me now, a lot of my clients started with me as an editor, and now have some of them have grown with me to now having me come on as a producer for other ideas that come up. And in that way, I'm always structuring with them, not just practically. I know you get this right away, Rhodes, but like not just trying to figure out budgets and not figuring out location, all that stuff, but also, hey, if we're going to bring in a director, or if I'm directing or whatever it is, we need to just figure out exactly what we're going into these interviews asking, or we need
Yeah.
to figure out, like you said, you kind of have to script it, because it's very important. It's super important to not give people everybody's backstory. That's what I've learned, is you don't want to, give people the entirety of everybody's story. And there's multiple subjects that you're doing that with. You really just have to like fine tooth comb, really find the one thing that matches what you want to say as a documentarian or as an artist, and connect that to something that you related to with them, and just focus on that one thing. Because if it's, I always talk about this, if it's a Arnold Schwarzenegger, or if it's a Travis Scott, or like these big docs that are so huge, everybody knows these guys. They don't need to have a backstory told about them. And I think they're a really good case study in like,
Yep.
hey, we can just pick up in moments of their life and people will remember. And they might do some background, but they don't have to do a lot of background. And that's kind of like a good idea, a good template for people. And they can take the liberty to go through their life in more detail, because everybody knows their life. So it's different if they did want to go that way. But I think it's just about like really limiting your scope, and pre-production matters so much at that point, because then if you're able to do that, that your post process is going to be much simpler, because you are applying it similar to like what you would apply on a script. I think narrative scripts are probably some of the easiest to cut, because you do have whereabouts of where to go, and now you're just picking different takes for the most part,
Yeah.
right? You're still thinking with the same mindset, but yeah, it's still hard. Yeah.
I feel that same way. I did a lot of like event videography early on, and you just
Yeah.
had really quick turnarounds, and so I got like really fast at editing, and then just I don't know, really finding the main points, really cutting things down a lot, because you only have those 30 seconds to a minute. And I feel like with narrative editors, they're like, oh, we just need to keep the whole 30 minutes. I'm like, no, we just need about 10 minutes of this.
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but on the flip side of that, like I'm more of a storyteller editor. I'm not the creative editor. So I've seen some people edit and they just make some really beautiful stuff, and I'm just not that kind of editor. There's different styles of editing.
Yeah.
How would you frame yourself as like style
I'm
wise?
I'm definitely story editor for
Yeah.
sure. I'm definitely I was just, it's so weird you said that. I was just thinking about that yesterday, where I can make stuff, especially in the music video space. I've made some pretty cool looking visuals and stuff like that, but I definitely have a limit now to where I see myself. And that actually goes a lot toward what your balance is, your personal life balance too, because I could explore forever in this career path, forever. And I could get better and better in certain areas. But at what point do you need to divide and conquer, which is something that I think we've talked about a lot just on the community side. It's so important to bring these a big arsenal of people to the same thing with the same vision, because then you execute it in a way that didn't happen before, where you're stuck with the edit. I'm actually talking to myself right now, because there's something I need to get done, and my buddies will know exactly what that is. But it's also like a challenge, I think, to, with being just a story editor. I'm thinking so heavy on, hey, this is what this should be. These are what bytes should play here. This is what like this kind of is saying. Here's where we're working towards some sort of a climax, and we're kind of landing the plane. But I could tell you what I need visually in certain areas. So
Yeah.
I feel like I do have a mix, but I know you probably relate to that too, where if I know I need a sequence that feels a certain way, like I always think of Baz and how he's done, how he did Gatsby, and how he, like, those movies do feel like that, where it's like, here's all the story stuff, and then we need this one scene that feels like the acid trip scene, and then it's just all of this stuff going. But that's why I respect, and I think my biggest inspo has always been music videos in a weird way, because I think I'm so connected to music. I
Oh,
grew
yeah.
up I grew up taking piano and playing drums and stuff like that because my parents wanted me to, and I'm so glad because now I see that I can understand and hear an edit in a different way, especially once I connect it to music. All of a sudden, when that happens, I'm sure every editor kind of feels this in some way. You know exactly what needs to be there all of a sudden. You've heard, you've listened
Yeah.
already to the bytes without it. Now you're like, okay, this goes here. Oh, this would be weird if it was here. And then this goes here. So it's kind of like I feel like I could do that pretty well on the story side. And then anything over top, though, I'm just chalking up now to VFX type work. I think you can get it assembled loosely for them, but somebody needs to come through, I think, with that outside take and just go, I see the story this way, and then put it all together in the weird way,
It just keeps going back to like everyone should be an editor in some way, because
Yes.
if you know that, then you are a better producer. You're able to sell the product better because you can give them some ideas of like what you're thinking for their end. For marketing purposes, you're better at asking interview questions because you know what kind of story you're trying to tell. You kind of get to know your audience a little bit better. And overall, I think it just makes you a better communicator about speaking quickly and concisely and getting to the point,
Yeah.
because sometimes people like to just really stretch things out, and it's just so unnerving when they
You're freaking me out right now. That's painful just hearing it. Well, and even like we were talking about, this might be a good segue if you want to take it there, is just the barrier for entry now to get into this stuff is like literally there's no barrier to entry anymore
yeah
to get
yeah
into editing. There's really none. I mean, you can if you take something like where Resolve is at right now, you can download Resolve for free, and more than likely you might have a Pocket 6K for $1,500 or whatever, $2,000, and it comes with the product code, and suddenly you're in the pro version, $300 software, just by owning a camera, or the free version. I'm starting to now teach a little bit more, and I've had the opportunity to kind of start to see if I can mentor a little bit. And what I'm telling those individuals is like, hey, you have the opportunity to download this for free and get 90% of the features nowadays. So I don't normally edit in Resolve because I'm such a Premiere guy. So I eventually I think I could see myself switching at some point, but I can't deny that like it's so easy to get into this now, and you have so many tools to be
yep
able to do it to where guys like us, we were talking about this before, and a lot of our peers are people that didn't know this beforehand and just dove into it at some point and just tried to cut for the first time, and then suddenly have found a way to kind of make money off of it and build a community and all that stuff. But that's repeatable. I wish more people would feel the energy around that and be like, yeah, I'm just gonna go shoot something and then cut it. Like there's really no limits anymore. I mean, even your phone, I know there's so much conversation around the iPhone 15 and all that stuff, but you really could just go shoot for a day and you have enough to at least start practicing. So I'm trying to put people into that mindset of like, you at some point need to learn how to control your story, and sometimes the best way to do that is just by editing it and practicing.
yeah Speaking of platforms, what did you start on? I started on iMovie HD, batch
Yeah, I
capturing
was
little mini DVs and stuff.
yeah, I was on iMovie. I think I was on oh, I'm thinking Final Cut. Whatever was right before Final Cut 10. So it was early
Like Final
iMovie.
Cut 7 or something.
Yeah.
But
And I
iMovie
never
was
I
before,
never
yeah.
worked in Final Cut 7. I wish I would have, because it was a lot more like where Premiere's at now,
Yeah.
but um
I
yeah, the
did use
OG iMovie.
I did use
Yeah.
Windows Movie Maker for like one slideshow a long time ago. Super
Yeah,
cringe,
not
but
the same. Yeah. iMovie was like this thing that I started I started editing when I was 10, and I'm 26 now,
oh,
and
cool.
I've pretty much edited every day of my life since then, because I can't. I think it might partly be an OCD thing for me, where I just have this thing in the back of my head always that's like, oh, if you just cut this a little bit more today, you might get a little bit further. And I think that's good, and I've had to learn how to balance that a little bit, but went from that to Final Cut 10 because I quickly figured out that I could only push iMovie so far. I think
Yeah.
within a couple years, I was like, okay, I can't really do anymore here. Can I get Final Cut? So I saved up and tried to buy Final Cut, and I got Final Cut 10, and I worked in Final Cut 10 until I got that job when I was 16, and I learned all the Adobe stuff there. So
So you've used them all. Like, which one is you said you're an Adobe guy now. Is that your
yeah,
favorite? Is
I
it just
love
because the
Premiere.
crossover?
Yeah, and I just feel like where Premiere is at, it met me at a time where I was trying to get more nuanced and more like more tools and more like like the linear editing is much more precise, and like I can move my playhead and feel where it was in the timeline and stuff. And I liked once I learned the integration with like After Effects and Audition and all of that stuff, and that you could just do that dynamic link thing and all that. I was like, this thing is pretty cool. I love that you could do all that stuff. And but people that are starting now are like, oh, it's too nuanced for me. I need something that's like a little bit simpler, and I think that's where Resolve's editor is great. But
Yeah.
I'd argue you could do a lot in Resolve. I've cut a short doc in Resolve, and it was pretty great. It was pretty easy to use, and I just haven't gotten used to the interface fully. So
Yeah.
I'm
Same.
sticking with my guns at the moment. Yeah,
I just like I need to get something done. I don't have time to just dabble around and figure it out again. So I just stick with Adobe. Plus, I mean, people
yeah,
say the price. That's a big deal. But
yeah,
I got it in the Adobe Suite in college, so it was $20 for student. When I
yeah.
left
It's
college,
awesome.
it went up $10
Hmm.
and has not changed. And
Yeah,
it's supposed to be like
that's
70
how
bucks
mine
a month.
is.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
like
hopefully they don't see
Adobe,
any
don't
of this
check us
stuff.
out.
Yeah,
Don't look
hopefully
at
they
our
don't see
websites.
any of this stuff. Yeah,
So I just kept it. I was like, man, I'm getting like half off. This is
yeah,
whatever. Yeah, I'll just
yeah. But the barrier for entry is it's the same conversation. If you've never cut before, I think you should cut in Resolve because you can
yeah,
start right away. You don't have to look at Premiere as like this. I think there is this like weird, oh, it's so expensive, it's got to be really hard to learn, or and so I think a lot of people don't want to invest right away into that. But as you know, I mean, you and I both are, I think, big proponents of this. A lot of our industry is based on investment, and it's very important to invest in a lot of things: relationships, software, gear, whatever it is. You do have to make initial investments to get going if you want to level up. I think all of us at some point have realized, like, okay, I could do this level with this amount of gear, my entry level gear, but then if I got this tool, it really does bring everything else up with it. And so I've seen that happen, and I've seen like people get more crafty about, like, okay, and it all goes back to editing, right? Like, get more crafty about how they make their deliverables faster, or how they make it look better, or whatever it is. And then all of a sudden you jump that tier and you're able to buy more gear, and then you're able to, and then it's just, you go into bankruptcy because you just do it your whole life. but but no,
you thought
it's cool
editing
though,
was
right?
cheap.
Yeah, editing is probably the cheapest part of
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
actually, but
Best return on
it's still
investment.
storytelling, right? And it's
Yeah,
investment, and it's what we love, where it's it's people that all are in a very similar pursuit as us. That's the thing that's so exciting about filmmaking, that I think in a landscape like LA that's so saturated, or in Atlanta or New York or whatever, it can be a challenge because you're battling against so many of yourself. That level that you're at, you're battling against so many different people that are just like you for jobs, that it ends up being this competitive landscape. I think what we have special here in the upstate is just that right now there is competition, but it's not like it's this weirdly collaborative thing, because I think the city and the counties out here and stuff all want to see this go. They all want to see this industry really blow up, as Atlanta's starting to kind of funnel people out more and more. And they're starting to go see Charlotte, but they've heard about Greenville, so they're
and
probably going to
LA.
stop in Greenville. Yeah, and LA, yeah, LA or New York people coming down, or people from Miami coming up, or whatever it is. I think that's pretty cool that we've got this like very supportive, beautiful, network here that we've grown. And it's really just relationships. It's not really a network, but
Yeah.
you know.
So you said the barrier to entry for, especially for editing, is minimal, and so there are lots of editors, but there's not. So finding a good editor. So a lot of the people that are constantly doing work, they don't have the time to do the work and to edit, so they have to
Mm-hmm.
find a good editor.
Yep.
What is your? I mean, I've tried some people, and yes, they can cut stuff, but it's not my style.
Yeah.
And so it's not necessarily that they did a bad job. It's just like how I would do it. And so there's like a little conflict in between there. And are they a good editor? Or are they just not my editor kind of thing?
Yeah.
But so finding a good editor has been hard for me. And so I just do everything myself. It ends up being.
And I think that's probably a lot of people that, especially people that have a vision for how they know it's supposed to be. So I was an editor at the early stages, like so right before moving out here is when I got on as an assistant editor of Spellers, which is a documentary that I did with about autism and stuff like that, and that was a director that was very seasoned, that'd been in the industry for a long time, probably twice my age, who was looking for somebody to just cut and assemble footage for him, not even put a story together. But I made such a case as I was going through it because I connected with it so much that I would take it to not a different level, but I would take it to this part, or I would go and pitch this part of the story, and I would start pitching to him on the phone, which was probably a little risky for me to do if I really wanted to hold on to that job. But I've just learned, if you hear any story about anybody in the film industry, they all do that. They all do that. It's an industry that's moldable. You don't
Yeah.
have to act like somebody's so unapproachable. If you're in cahoots with them and you're talking with them and you're already doing things, collaborating, feel free to like start saying your piece on things, because I think it's important for you to have a voice through that, right? But with editing, he needed somebody that could balance his vision, because he had those people in production when they were shooting, but he didn't have that in post yet. So it was either he was going to edit it because he was so close to it, or he was going to find somebody without a bias at that point he'd been working on it for a year, right? He needed to find somebody that didn't have a bias, which was me, but I saw the value in it. So I think it's something along those lines when you're looking for somebody on the post side, especially an editor, is it really comes down to, does the editor want to collaborate on the overall mission and theme of the project, or the story of the project? Do they really resonate with it? Or are you hiring that editor just to do that editor's flavor?
To what you're saying, I think it would be a lot of fun to hire an editor that knows the story and then hire
Mm-hmm.
an editor that has no connection to it whatsoever so that they can just actually cut it down to time because they're like, oh, we can cut
Dude,
that out. That's
put
easy.
them put
Yeah.
them in a room, and just watch them like lab
Yeah.
rats and see what comes
Huh?
up. Yeah, see how much time one versus the other puts in, or yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Speaking of those
inhumane, but
things, like what are some pet peeves when you see other edits and other cuts? Like for me, two of the main things, and even like with film festivals, pacing
mhm,
and sound
mhm.
design.
Yeah, those are huge. I think both of those speak into the point we just made, which is, if people are not directly connected to the story and they're thinking just technically, you're not going to, it doesn't work. It can be a means to an end for sure, right? You can definitely get somewhere with being technical. You have to be technical. But I would argue I'm more of like a feel editor, so I've learned what I need to learn to be able to get into it and be able to be efficient. But I'm not always up to date on all the tools all the time, because I'm more like what you just said, where you need to get something done. I need to sit down and approach something familiar to me, and I'm going to go for it. I think pet peeves there, though, are like, for me, have to be people cutting hype edits. That one drives me crazy, because I just don't see. I see it's cool, but to me, that's trendy. And I think if you cut as a trendy editor throughout your career, you're going to have to keep learning how to cut new styles all the time. That is a pet peeve of mine, because
Yeah, that's a good point.
if you like if you keep waiting for that next trend to come, then you're going to have to adapt your style completely. And then you don't really have a voice as an editor. You don't have any sort of consistency by which somebody would approach you, unless you're the hype guy. And then somebody approaches you for a hype edit, which I really am not hating on it, because I've been asked to do that. But I think there's a way to kind of find what your voice is and be centered as an editor and be approached for a lot of different styles, but they know that they're going to get an output that is, like we were talking about earlier, that is, approachable and matches what the overall vision is. So that's definitely a pet peeve for sure.
The one thing I will say to that is like trying different things to add to like your arsenal. So if you see something really cool and cut differently than you've never done before, and maybe learning the shortcut of how to do it on an editing platform, so that you can add those little tiny special effects in that amp up your shot just for
Hmm.
minimal time.
Yeah.
But Peter McKinnon actually did a video about this. Is like, it took me 2 hours to make this 2 second shot, but it changes the whole thing. And
Hmm.
cost to pay off may not always be there, but just learning those techniques and stuff like that can really help you. So trying out what you see other people doing, not against it, but that doesn't mean you should become them. You
Yeah,
still
you
have your own
shouldn't
voice. Yeah,
copy
yeah,
you
yeah.
shouldn't copy them completely, but yeah, you're right. I mean, it's really important to learn different formats. And I think formats don't change. You'll always have some sort of a you'll always have some sort of a high energy, upbeat type of an edit that you'll have to make for, a network intro or something like that. Like that exists. It's a style, especially in sports and all that stuff. You'll always have that, right? But the hype edit stuff that's right now that looks, I mean, the Instagram fatigue is just so crazy right now because it's just so all the same thing, and it's all that like crazy transition stuff and huge text popping up in the center. I'm like, I think that's going to be a wave. I hope that doesn't keep going into the future. But like that's an area of it that exists right now that doesn't like consider all of the actual technical. It's just like whatever we can do to the footage, we'll scale it in until it's way past resolution or whatever that's got to be. So I think I think you're right. I think you do have to learn all the different styles because you do need to know how somebody approaches you for, if somebody wants you to come do a music video, you have to have done a music video before most of the time, unless it's the first time. Then you can fake it till you make it, you know?
No, there was an article out from Jerry Seinfeld that was saying like the movie age is kind of over a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's very much changing, and with social media editing and video content created that way, content creators, influencers, the YouTube age. I mean, that's been around for a long time,
Right.
but like the vlog style was very popular for a very long time, and like sitting center in camera. It's like, well, there's no rule of thirds framing. The whole way you shoot, the way you edit, everything was changing, and we've even seen like a few movies come out, kind of with those influences.
Mm-hmm.
Do you
Yeah.
think like the truest filmmaking style will still reign, or will we see more change?
I think it will because I think the fatigue is going to be there coming up. I think it's starting to happen a little bit where I think it's more that people have their bona fide channels now. And I think YouTube is like this informal, YouTube's an awesome platform still. I think it's still a great
Everyone should
platform.
have a
Like,
YouTube.
yeah, I don't know why
Every
people do. I
business, yeah,
mean,
every person.
it is the most amazing thing for getting into filmmaking. Like I was talking earlier about like starting to teach more. I like sent a whole Resolve tutorial, just a 35-minute course that's just free on YouTube to these kids just to start learning how to. I'm like, this is so accessible now. It was not like that when we all started, and we're even on the newer side of the industry anyway. But like, it is such a interesting thing because I think to your question, I think narrative and doc storytelling in general has to be the pinnacle of what we do as filmmakers. And we can do the video things for hire, like commercial and doing all that stuff, but I think that is the pinnacle of what is going to stick around because I do believe that people are going to get this kind of AI thing that's going to come through. It will come through at some point. There will be a fully generated AI movie, I think, at some point. People are going to go see it. It's probably going to make a ton of money. It's probably going to be a cultural phenom, for a while. But then when that second or third movie comes around, are people gonna say it's going to be the only way that we're going to watch movies, or is it just going to be a one-off thing that comes every once in a while as part of maybe there's a studio that does AI movies, right? Like, I just don't think that if it's fully generated, I just don't really believe that an audience will be there full all the time for that, meaning that the entire industry changes. I think it's more that it's going to be another flavor and a style that people are going to want to do. But if we don't know how to understand, like, even just hero's journey or different ways to structure storytelling, then we're not going to be able to feed that to, devices. And I think people want to feel that sort of sense of like a human made this. And yeah, there's some human error in this at times, just like any great movie has a little bit of the human error in it. But we love that stuff because we made it. And it's something, it's a this is a much bigger conversation, but I hope that people see that, and I hope that filmmakers understand that they're more than just making commercial campaigns. You know, like
Yeah.
I think we should always, because previously, right, that's where a ton of money is. That's where you can
Yep.
make a good amount of money and do all that stuff. But I think we should always keep the pursuits going of our filmmaking work, even if it's hard, because I think there's more of a demand, especially where we live right now. There's more of a demand in the Southeast right now for it than probably there's ever been. And it seems to be growing, growing, growing and changing. So you never know what could happen in the next couple of years with all this stuff, you know?
I have a multifaceted question with that. Like knowing your audience and we've changed to a generation of like just putting stuff out as quickly as possible. But I've also noticed that like when I edit something quickly and I know I'm not as proud of it, the client is still like, "Oh, this is great. Thank you so much for doing this." Da, 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 da. It's like it's not that great. Sometimes the content that you actually have to capture isn't that great to begin with, but
Right.
with being easily pleased, um, you can't show that on your website or to your film friends, and so there is a push to one do something more creative versus just
Mm-hmm.
talking head, but also to have something that you can show at a film festival or your friends. And so you can definitely make money doing something quick, just get it done, or you can do something time consuming but just really well. Where should people, do you think they should land? Do you think you should do both? um,
Mm-hmm.
what's your take on?
Yeah, that's a good thought. I think it's kind of, I think it depends on what the project is. Like with new clients, I'm always asking, because I never know fully what they want from me when I first get approached. Do they want
I
more
don't think
of
they do.
the?
They don't know
No,
either.
they never do. They never do when they ask any of us. I don't
How much is
think.
it
I
going to
think,
cost? Like, you want a Super Bowl commercial? Because that's a couple
yeah,
million.
yeah, that's a lot. That's gonna be a lot to do. Yeah, exactly. But I think that's the point. I think it's really, I try to feel people out and just get a sense of like, where do you, whoever's paying the money, right? Where do you want to take this? Because if it's a certain, you might have aspirations toward having it look like you said, top bar, but I don't know realistically if we can take it there with this, what you have now. But sometimes I think it's worth that conversation of like, you can't beat something to death that you're getting hired to do all the time unless there's funding to keep supporting you to beat it to death. You know what I mean? Meaning at some point you do have to walk away from it and just move on. And I think going into that kind of a project, you do need to know that that's going to be what it is. And it's not going to be the masterpiece that you're making. That's your purest expression, which is why I think I tell people so much to, you know, you don't want to be known as somebody that's like shooting for free type stuff, but like you do want to make a couple proof of concepts at some point at every level that are achieving, that show here's where I'm at and this is my expression unadulterated from anybody else. Nobody's telling me how to say what I'm going to say in this project, right? In this narrative, in this, doc or whatever it is. So I think it's two lanes. I think it's, if it's for hire, you're getting hired to do it. You kind of are always going to have the headspace of like, yeah, this is not going to be mine. It's okay. I need to do my best, give them my best of what my expression is. But it might not be all the way, because honestly, with the amount of collaboration that you're going to have to do with them and compromising, it's never going to be fully what you want. And even what you want to do on the passion side, depending on how your team is built out, you're making compromises there. So really, I just feel like our whole career path is just us learning people skills, dude. It's like the whole thing is relationships. Everything comes down to how do you manage relationships to get the highest output, and how do you take feedback from those people that are on your teams towards yourself to look inward and be like, am I doing this the right way? Because everybody feels like they have their perfect take on something, that this is how it's supposed to be. But then you hear it from somebody else and you're like, well, that's kind of a good idea too. I didn't even think about that. I thought my way was the only way, right? But so I think there's lanes to it. You can't convince a client of all of that stuff all the time, unless it's somebody that knows you really well and wants you just for that. But then you're gonna have to kind of, stand up for yourself and
Yeah.
be like, it's gonna have to be this way.
I was white labeling through somebody for editing, and so I'd edit to impress the person I was white labeling for the marketing company, but then I have to also impress their client, and then that also has to impress their customers, which
Oh
is
my
the end
gosh.
person. And so you're trying to make something that one that you like or comfortable. It doesn't feel too cheesy, but oftentimes you have to edit really cheesy stuff because that tends to be what works for their clients. But also just getting approval from so many other people and so many notes and feedbacks. How what's so like I don't even know how to phrase the question, but you've gotten feedback on changes and edits? Some of them are like, okay, that makes sense. Most of them, though, are like,
Or not, yeah.
you're stupid. What do you? This is perfect the way I did it.
It's dude, that is like the hardest thing for me is the feedback. But as I've done it more, you do end up longing for it because it does make the project better. But it depends on who is it from, right? Like if it's a trusted collaborator of mine that's
Yeah,
giving
yeah,
harsh feedback, it means more to me because I'm like, oh, I didn't see it that way, or okay, I do see what that means. Like how this sounds to me sounds different than what it does to somebody completely unbiased or whatever it is, right? But dude, I've been through, I mean, especially the feature length projects that I've done, I've been through some major revisions, like
and then
a
rendering it out a
lot.
second time.
Dude, I mean, wait, dude, I think probably on one of them, I for sure did close to 100 revisions on
Oh
it
my
because it was
gosh.
over a couple of years that we were working on it. And that's the thing with documentaries, it's tough is like as the world changes, the doc can also change. It's not cemented in its own time period where it's done, you know. It can always be molded and changed, which is hard because you do have to put limits on that as an editor. You have to be like, I think this is I hear you, but I feel like this is too far out of context. So if you don't know your story, you can't fight those battles, right? But how do you balance I'm trying to figure that out every day, but like how do you balance properly between, you know, the client that's giving you feedback or a director or whatever versus the number of revisions that you're getting? What is how do you sift through that to know what is right or wrong? Because sometimes it's a stylistic choice that you made that you feel like they don't like, and then all of a sudden that feels like an attack, and then you have to go to bat to justify why you made that change. That can be exhausting. I think that might be the most exhausting part of all feedback and revisions is like
Yeah,
fighting for the choice you made, and then when you don't win that choice, it's even worse when you don't win that choice because of a client, but the entire creative team sees it the same way that you saw it, and
yeah.
they change it and they make, you know, like I just had a project where we lost an entire scene that was integral to the story because of legal. And I'm sitting
Wow.
there and I'm like,
Yeah,
wow, I mean, that killed the entire arc. There's really no arc now. And the whole creative team is just like, it's devastated because it's just, we don't have any pull, and we're always going to have to deal with that because that had more, it was a storytelling project, but it had more to do with a corporate angle. So corporations that are at the top are it's way easier for them to just say no, piss off, you know, the creatives, and just throw money at it. They just
yeah,
throw money at it and then hope that we all are satisfactory, which just happened. And yeah, I mean, sure, I could get over it, but you know, that might be another piece that's like, I don't really want to show it. And how many of those do we have? That's the thing that I think a lot of clients don't see when they approach us is they see our website and our portfolio, but they have no idea how many other pieces are not there.
yeah,
Like I
yeah.
would say I'm only showing on my website, I'm probably only showing
One,
20
2%.
projects.
Yeah,
Yeah, 10 to 20 projects on there. I've done, you know, at this point, probably over 1,000 projects, you know,
right.
from the courses, the 100 courses I did at LinkedIn to all the other stuff before it to the stuff I'm doing now, music, little one-off music videos that take me 1 or 2 days. There's so many things in there that I don't show. So I think it's like,
I've
it gets emotional, dude. It's an emotional thing. It's a battle for us to
I've
really like fight
definitely
for it.
I've definitely told clients to not tag me.
Yeah,
Like I don't want this attached to me. This is not,
I know.
conducive
And
to
then
my
they
work.
still
But
do sometimes. and you,
all right.
now you can remove the tag. you
So
know,
with that, like, what's doing something that's perfect versus kind of on the same vibe, but doing something that's perfect versus good enough. I've heard it both ways. Don't let good enough stand in the way of perfect, and don't let perfect stand in the way of good enough. Where do
mm-hmm.
you? I mean, like, how do you feel about that? I'm more so the good enough because the ROI on that extra, 5%, better
Not the
is just not,
highest.
yeah.
Yeah. I think I am a perfectionist, so I think my finished pass of something is already going to be more meticulous than how a lot of people probably that are in the good enough category view it, which is fine. So now I've kind of learned that I need to lean toward good enough. I'll never be able to just punt something at the fence. I can't do that. I won't, like, there's something inside of me that will not allow me to let something be a half effort or whatever it is. So I think it really comes down to, as long as you give your best effort and you've gone through the feedback and you've gone through changes and you feel like that product is at a level that you would put out there, but there's that 5 to 10% that you still wish you could change, that's when you just need to move on and just say it's good. And it's at a level, if I know that I've held myself accountable during the editing process to make this thing the best thing that it can be for what it is without overdoing it. Because you can tell when you overdo it. I've had those where
Yeah,
you get
yeah.
an edit that's good enough and then you go an extra 10% and the 10% messes up the whole project.
Extra
So
10% on the saturation.
because yeah maybe because
Saturated.
you're so it's because you definitely see it in color, actually, more than anything. When you do this, you see it in color more than anything because you do push it too hard, and then sometimes you'll lose information that was good before that you didn't need to do, which is why you version things. It's another reason why you can go back to a version that you did before. But no, I think you're right. I think you do need to come to a point that's like, this is good enough, and I need to, what you're really saying is, I need to value my time right now. That's a huge thing that I didn't do because I've been so investment minded for the last couple of years that I've been trying to pull back on now and be like, okay, I know you're trying to do the best for the client right now. Like, if I'm talking to myself, I know you're trying to do the best for the client right now, but you're also devaluing what kind of work you're doing, because a lot of times you're making those changes for not any more money, right? So you might
Right.
as well just walk away.
Yeah. What does your editing day look like? For example, mine, I will take a 30-minute break every 35 minutes. So I'll break for 30 minutes and then work for 5 and then break for 30 and then work for or I
That
have like
sounds balanced. I love
my
that.
I'll have spurts, and I used to
Yeah.
edit at night. A lot of people do. I cannot do that anymore. I have to go to bed with my wife. I have to get that full sleep, but I have like a 3 hour spurt in the morning or a 3 hour spurt in the afternoon where I can just really knock out a ton of work at one time. Um,
Yeah.
what's it look like for you?
As somebody who's done all of that, has pulled all nighters, has started at 9 p.m. and gone overnight, or has worked from 8 a.m. all night long until the next morning. I've done that before a couple times, very not healthy to do. But I've done a couple 23-hour things before on
Oh
rushes
my gosh.
for, and you can guess maybe where that would have happened. The startup. So when we were trying to prove something, it felt like you had to do that stuff. But, it's something that, like, I think what you said there is super important. It's the balance part of it. And if you're married or if you have a family, you cannot be doing those things as much. There might be once in a blue moon where you have
Yeah,
to,
yeah,
if you have to. But when it comes to day, I think the way I approach it now is, like, I sit down and, normally in the morning, like, somewhere around 8 or 9 or so, and I work for, a good chunk of time. And what I'm noticing now is I can figure out, I don't really have a time window because I try to approach it more inspiration based. So if I feel inspired by
yeah.
it, I will approach it. And there's normally a number of different projects I've got at any given time. So if I'm frustrated with one, more than likely it's pushing me to start, working on the other one that needs to be worked on. So I've been trying to balance that out, where if I can do it in a burst of like an hour or two, or setting a timer. So like you were saying, setting a timer every once in a while, I'll just do an hour. I'll just set a timer for an hour and I'll just say no distractions, go for it. But if I'm feeling inspired and I feel like I can take something somewhere story wise because I've had an inspiration, I'll go until I get exhausted. And once I hit that mark that we talked about, that 10%, where I'm starting to spin the wheel and cut stuff that didn't need to be cut, I just stop and I walk away from it. And I go do something else. I go, I jump on a call or I do a meeting or something like that. And then I try to reapproach it. But it's really what you said, the balance part is super important. You can't let this stuff creep into your personal life. It'll always feel that way because it is such a love. It's a love for us. We craft because we love to do this stuff, most of the time. I don't know if there's anybody in our industry that truly hates it fully, even though it's hard. I think they hate the
Oh yeah.
resistance and the challenges and all that, but everybody hates that. But I think our business is so passionate that it crosses over with personal. So you have to figure out a way to split that. So I
But
respect your take on it.
when you do make something good though, and
Oh
it
man,
just feels so good, and
there's not a feeling like that. I mean, the only thing I can liken that to really is when me and my wife fell in love. Like that's the only thing that's close
love
to,
it.
like that's higher, much of a higher tier than where my art is, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's close.
That's cool. Last question. Do you have any like tips and tricks for people when editing, and what are some things you've learned that just have sped you up, or how
Yeah.
to negotiate pricing for yourself, or what? Any of those things?
I'll give a technical and I'll give a business. So a technical would be learn how to make transitions happen.
Oh gosh.
Not cross dissolves, not that stuff, but learn
Yeah.
how to make a scene transition. If you can learn how to make a scene transition, it'll stay with you through everything because it matters in commercial, it matters in documentary, it matters in narrative, it matters in music video because you always need that kind of bridge. It's easy to come up with the meat, but if you can figure out the bridge to get it to the next scene, it's huge. So that's my technical. I've been learning that a lot in the last couple of years. Business wise, I think it's really just what we talked about at the beginning. Put more emphasis on the people that you're in the business with horizontally. I always talk about that. Build with your peers, which is a lot of what we're doing right now in Greenville. Build with all of your peers, and let the peers bring everybody up. Whether it's you, whether it's somebody else, have that be built up, be multifaceted. That's a big part of that, I think, with business. And then also, look to build other people up, before yourself, and don't rely on just showing people what you do. Be a person that will speak highly of other people as well as of their craft, and people will come back and remember how you treated them. And it's not calculated. It's just try to be a good person because there's so many a-holes in our business that don't even consider other people or gatekeep. And we all know how that feels, and it sucks. And if you're one of those people, back to those people because it happened to you, it doesn't work that way. You then just keep passing that down, and it's not good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So trying to build community, be a part of each other's lives, and make the difference that you can make within your small community is important, because you'll never be able to reinvent the wheel that way. You might do something in significant contribution to the film industry, but I was just at NAB. There were thousands of booths of people all in different categories in production doing about the same thing. Some of them really excellently, and then you go to a booth that nobody knows that's also very excellent. They're doing the same kind of pursuit. Everybody's trying to push to the next level, So that's what I
Love
would
it.
say.
Yeah. I have mixed feelings locally when I see people working, and I have so much FOMO because I just want to be on everything. I want to help people out. Not like that I'm trying to get paid or get more work. I just want to be on projects with people because it's fun. But at the same time, well, I guess there are a few that's like, oh, I could have gotten that client. But no,
Yeah.
there are a few that, well, I mean, the other side of it is just that I see them and I see them working and I love it. And I love that everything's building, and they're my friends. And I'm like, yes, you're doing it. Love it. Awesome. And even people that I've got to watch from the very beginning are just out there crushing it, and super cool. So
And social media is your best friend now. Like, you don't have to limit yourself to one market. Look at me. I mean, I
yeah,
grew up in one market and I've come out to a new market, but I still have my contacts there. I still have contacts all over the place. I've used social media to just build the base bigger, of people. It doesn't just have to be local, but there is something special happening in our city right now that I'm excited to explore in the coming years.
cool. Well, thank you, Evan, for chatting with us about
Thank
editing,
you.
and hope you guys enjoyed the show. If you want to check us out, if you want to see our faces, you can actually see us on YouTube. Um, we'll post it there on our podcast on YouTube. We also will have it on Spotify and also on Apple Podcasts. And you can also check out the show notes at indiefilmhub.org for any more information. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.